Certainly 1965 was the height of the Cold War. Vietnam was very important for the Americans, and the war wasn't going too well. The Marines had landed, but they had taken some bad reverses. And so when it appeared that at the back door, Indonesia was about to go completely into the communist orbit, there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of fear.
Then Sukarno appears to collapse at a public reception, raising the stakes even further.
There were rumors that his kidney was failing, and of course put the army on high alert.
It did raise questions. If he's sick, what will happen if he dies? Who will move? Who will take over? The PKI do it by themselves? Will the army do it? Will God knows who else do it?
Rumors circulate that an Army Council of Generals, backed by the CIA, is plotting to overthrow Sukarno.
Army was clearly keen if Sukarno became incapacitated, they would seize power.
Ani raga patut waspada. Apa angon waspada dharma ne jalan gisi. Angon munahang sahanane ngomo darawake beh dewa ratu. Cicing boros. Dugas pidan sing kita ane tatak tutuk rakyat tadi sengsara lantas tuh.
On the 30th of September 1965, Indonesia is changed forever. This 4-hour film is General Suharto's version of the events of that night. It was shown every year on all television stations while he was in power. It portrays junior army officers supposedly under control of the communist PKI, kidnapping and killing the head of the army and 5 senior generals. General Suharto puts down the so-called 30th of September movement and heroically saves the nation. It's all over in less than 24 hours.
My God, they said, well, they've done it. And the air attache came running in and said, the servants in his house said they were shooting out in back of his house. Some general got hit, they said. Turns out to be Panjaitan, who lived right behind him there. So, well, this was a, beginnings of a very upsetting environment. But we didn't know what the heck was going on.
The morning of October 1st, when Time magazine called me and said, Don, there's been a tremendous coup. We don't know what's going on, but we know that 6 of the top Indonesian generals have been killed in this slaughter overnight. And we don't know whether Sukarno is behind it, what's going on, but you're the only person, the only journalist in Hong Kong that has a visa.
3 days after the murders, the bodies of the dead generals are discovered in a well. President Sukarno has appointed General Suharto to restore security. Suharto personally witnesses the exhumation. Suharto also closes down the civilian press. The army-controlled newspapers run false but graphic stories telling how communist women had tortured and mutilated the generals, gouging out their eyes, cutting off their sexual organs, and dancing over their bodies. The Indonesian Communist Party, the PKI, is blamed for the abortive coup.
The first big event I covered in Jakarta was the funeral of the 6 generals. We had heard tales about the way this slaughter had been done, the mutilation of the generals, how they had been tortured and killed. And we had no way of knowing it. We didn't speak to any eyewitnesses. And so if the army put out with authority that these bodies were mutilated, it became the perception.
If the Communist Party was responsible, Western diplomats could not understand why it would mount such an ineffective operation.
I would have said it made no sense at that time because the communists were moving very effectively. They were achieving their objectives by other means. And I would have said, why in the heck should they mount a coup?
It was known that the murders were carried out by junior army officers calling themselves the 30th of September movement. But the question of who, if anyone, was pulling the strings behind these officers was much less certain. Nevertheless, the diplomatic cables do reveal the West was keen for Suharto and the army to drive home its advantage in this brutal Cold War struggle.
In the 3 or 4 weeks following the putsch, Norman Redaway put together a radio program which was then sent back into Jakarta and broadcast to Indonesian people, in the Indonesian language of course, purporting to be an Indonesian-sourced program. They were putting back a highly coloured version of the story that Suharto and his men were putting about.
The British-made propaganda program called The Voices from the Well was broadcast from a radio station set up next door to Suharto's house. The army set up a new tabloid to spread stories of the bestiality of the PKI. They emphasized that women will sink to utmost depravity under the godless communist influence.
It didn't have to take great skills for the army to whip up sentiments against the communists. At the same time, I think the whole party was still left in the lurch because they still were in the mode of the parliamentary road to power. So they were essentially defenseless and armed without arms. Exactly the situation Aidit was worried about.
Chairman Aidit, the communist leader, went on the run in Central Java, telling people to defy the accusations against him by carrying on as usual. It was advice that would prove fatal for many. PKI members in President Sukarno's cabinet were arrested, and other senior leaders secretly executed. Sukarno was rapidly losing his grip on power. He appealed for calm, but was powerless to protect the Communist Party he had courted for so many years.
After the 30th, when we heard about the rebels, we had very many books from Leninism, Marxism, and so on. My husband said that we must burn it.
Mobs of students hit the streets in protest against the PKI. The army supplied them with lists of targets to be attacked. The Communist Party headquarters was the first to be destroyed.
As time went on, we saw that the anti-Sukarno factions of students gained in strength and importance, and of course they were manipulated and steered by the army. I often saw army officers talking with or conferring with students, letting them know how far they could go that day.
From far, I saw a fire and saw so many people crying, exciting, and so on. And I said to my driver, "Oh, stop, saying, you must, we should drive on.
Dr. Sumiasi was coming home from work when she saw her house in flames.
Did you ever go back to your house, or was that the last?
Oh, no, not anymore to my house. It's already destroyed by the 2 or 3 trucks hired by group of Suharto.
Dr. Sumiasi and her husband left their 3 children with relatives and fled. Carmel Budiarjo lost her job as a translator in the Indonesian Foreign Office almost immediately. As suspected communists, Carmel and her husband were arrested by the military.
I was sitting in the small room on the side here, and the soldiers came in and they asked for me. That's where I was arrested, in the front room. When we were sitting in this jeep taking us out of town, the fellow who was in charge, he said, you have to blindfold. And that completely destroyed me, because I just couldn't understand why they were doing this. So I became hysterical then. And of course you always have the worst idea of what was going to happen. You know, going to be taken off and shot or something like that.
She was to spend 4 years as a political prisoner. In the capital city, even people with the most tenuous links to the PKI are arrested en masse. With the names of party members being given under torture, the net gets wider and wider. Dr. Sumiasi and her husband are caught on the run.
When Suroso called me for an interrogation, and he is very, very cruel, he said, are you a member of the PKI? Oh no. Are you doctor of the Sisi? I am not a member. How can I be a doctor of that?
As the wife of a party member, she was threatened with electric shock torture when she would not cooperate.
Oh, my heart beat it so hard, maybe that somebody can hear how hard it was. Then I blew him on his stomach. Hey, Pak Sana, don't do it, Pak. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Well, why? I am electrophile. What's that? Electrophile. Electrophile, I can die when you give me. Oh, it's very, very low. Although it's low, how low it is, I can die. And when I am dead, my spirit will strangle you.
With his balancing policy in ruins and under pressure from the military, President Sukarno appoints General Suharto as the new head of the army.
I, President, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Indonesia, appoint Major General Suharto. I appoint him as Minister, Commander of the Army.
Now in official control of the army, General Suharto plans the systematic destruction of the Communist Party. He immediately dispatches his para-commando troops to central Java. Here they purge any army officers sympathetic to the PKI. The army then turns its attention to alleged communist sympathizers all over Indonesia.
As long as there is still one communist in Indonesia, I think we still have military operations against this one person.
Well, Suharto gave the orders to clean up everything, to every commander who was under his organization. So this is what I did. I ordered all my people to send patrols out and captured everybody in the PKI post.
Captured PKI leaders at first stuck to their principles of keep your mouth shut, or you don't know anything, can't do anything, and don't understand anything. But the operations has found an efficient answer to these slogans by launching the drive of surrender, support the government, or die.
The district of Prambanan, known for its 1,000-year-old Hindu temple, was one of the first to feel the wrath of Suharto's ideological cleansing campaign.
The army swept through Java, looking for communists, stirring people up, and they came upon many peasants, and the soldiers would say, you're PKI, you're communist. And the poor peasant farmer would say, what do you mean PKI? What are you talking about? And the interrogation would go on, and the farmer might say, oh, you're talking about those guys who came around and offered us seed at cheap prices. Oh, yeah, sure. We signed up with them, but that doesn't mean I'm PKI. I wasn't a communist. Those are just fellows who helped me out when things were tough. And certainly they did kill communists. They also killed a lot of people who were probably not communist.
Kalau dipuruki kan ngubur yang mati kebedil wonten lepen iki. Sore gawe ruangan anu nggih ngubur bengi. Ana sing sederek niku nggih akeh ning kula mboten ngerti. Wong giliran kok lega wengi. Nek sing klaten wong edan, nek sing Prambanan wong kulon. Nek elingan kula nggih antane 800-an nggih. Liwat.
The army was in complete control. You couldn't get 10 feet out of Jakarta without proper papers and permission from the army. After hearing reports of great slaughter going on, I was finally allowed to drive down there. At that time, there were 2 or 3 military trucks filled with civilians, families, men, women, children. And we were told these were communist suspects. This wasn't something I was supposed to see, but I can recall that day there was something like 2,000 people just in that one day being rounded up and taken to a central holding place.
One of the most amazing things was that you had a major, massive communist movement done in with weaponry and power and force that was contributed by the Soviets, which is there's a tremendous irony in that, and we can't help but take a certain satisfaction in that.
In Yogyakarta, Ibnu Santoro's name is given to the army.
Jadi itu tepatnya adalah tanggal 10 November tahun 1965, ya. Kakak saya didatangi oleh 2 polisi militer, ya. Kemudian dijemput, kemudian dibawa untuk ke kantor polisi militer tadi itu. Terus kemudian pamit dengan istrinya sama anaknya dicium, terus kemudian sudah tenang aja. Saya mau ada urusan sebentar dengan pihak yang berwenang.